those who are here in person, and thank you to those who have joined us virtually. My name is David Gums. I am a director of the RMI Islands Energy Program, and I will be your moderator here today. For today's session, we request that you please mute your mics and microphones and that you post any questions that you may have in the chat. We'll collect those questions and have an opportunity to present those to the panelists at the end of the program. Our discussion here today brings together panelists from across lots of geographies doing meaningful work centered around a just, human-centric energy transition. We look forward to having an engaging fireside chat and to hear more about their work and their perspectives. We'll introduce RMI's newest initiative, the Energy Transition Academy, which aims to empower energy professionals to be leaders of clean energy economies in the global South and have meaningful role in international climate action. We will also preview the Africa Mini-Grids program, a GEF-funded initiative that will be implemented by UNDP and RMI. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that today's conversation is taking place at COP26 during a global backdrop of a devastating pandemic that's really brought issues concerning equity, justice, and sustainable development to the forefront of many people's minds. Many of us here are thinking about what is needed to achieve the ambitious SDG priorities and climate goals. And we believe that at the heart of this issue, it's often overlooked, the component of leadership, skills, and capacity. But a top-down technical capacity development approach will not be enough to meet our commitments. And instead, what is needed is a just energy transition, which will require us to reimagine energy leadership. This will help us to meet our goals of developing capacity for a human-centric energy transition. And with that, I'd like to briefly highlight our panelists today. We have Dr. Caitlin Bunker, Director, Islands Energy Program, my colleague. We have Mr. Lee Broy Abraham, General Manager, CEO of the British Virgin Islands Electricity Corporation. We have Ifeoma Malo, CEO, co-founder, Clean Tech Hub Nigeria. Dr. Greg Polzer, who is the co-director of SSHRC Energy Partnership, School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan. We have Dr. Austin Sheldon, Assistant Professor and Director at the University of Guam, Center for Island Sustainability and Sea Grant. We'll also hear a few words from Oliver Weisband, Principal Technical Advisor to the Energy UNDP at the close of our time together, who will preview some of the activities that are happening with the Africa Mini-Grids program. We want to thank you all, great and esteemed panelists, for joining us here today. And with that, I'd like to briefly hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Jason Meyer, to further frame this conversation and briefly introduce the Energy Transition Academy. Jason?
Yeah, good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone, especially to our panelists. Thank you for your time today. My name is Jason Meyer, Principal of RMI's Energy Transition Academy, or ETA. I'm honored to share a few words on the topic of this conversation, as well as preview the ETA, a new program of RMI launching in 2022. We hope to highlight in this session the need, perhaps the requirement, of a human-centric approach to the energy transition. Energy is linked to nearly all the SDGs. Equitable access to energy systems fosters employment opportunities, empowers historically marginalized and vulnerable communities. For no one to be left behind, a just and inclusive energy transition will also enhance an individual's opportunities, capabilities, and well-being. Countries in the Global South are bearing the brunt of the climate emergency. Despite their low contributions to greenhouse gas emissions, countries across sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, island regions are already experiencing health, economic, environmental, safety impacts of climate change. Yet energy practitioners, leaders, and communities in these regions are often marginalized from the international climate community. For example, lacking access to timely and relevant information, lack of access to the peer networking needed to address the unique challenges of upgrading energy systems while also trying to advance SDGs and recover from climate emergencies. Without these resources, these decision makers frequently confront complex, perhaps impossible energy challenges in isolation. The ETA begins with the premise the energy transition is ultimately a human transition. We must ensure a human-centered approach is at the front and center of energy leadership to reimagine capacity development to meet the ambitious 2030 agenda. Thus, if we are to achieve success, energy leaders need to be equipped with the right set of tools to be able to both meet global climate goals and local development priorities. It will require us to move from a top-down, technically oriented solutions approach to those that are also incorporating often overlooked components of leadership, skills, and capacity building, as the energy transition, again, is ultimately a human transition. So our approach, the Energy Transition Academy, a global platform for energy leaders to directly connect with and learn from peers locally and globally who are confronting similar challenges. And very briefly, the ETA consists of 3 primary initiatives. The first, an experience exchange program, so hands-on experience with decision-making in peer settings. 2, a leadership accelerator, a cohort approach to learning, networking, and peer collaboration. And 3, a global learning platform, so access to curated content, training, insights, templates, but also amplifying experience, telling stories, providing real-world examples. The ETA has been inspired by a people-first approach. In our design, we continue to reach out to prospective participants, partners, friends to inform our offering and focus a demand-driven design. And what we continue to hear in these dialogues is the need to empower the very people and communities responsible for the energy transition. So sessions like today are a unique opportunity for us to hear about what is working and how to incorporate that into our design. The other thing that we've learned through this outreach work, we've explored other energy and capacity development offerings and platforms out there. There are a lot, many doing great and important work at all levels. What can we learn from this constellation of offerings? The ETA is keenly interested in how to scale impact, how to think about truly unlocking systemic change. And what we've learned from all of these offerings is that in order to provide capacity development oriented to scaled impact, there are 5 key catalysts that continue to come up baked into design. So the first one, learning, obviously the kind of the front and center of capacity development, variety of formats, not just technical skills, but also soft skills, operational competency, et cetera. Community, local and global networks to connect practitioners, amplifying their work. 3, experience, an opportunity to exchange peer-to-peer engagement, contextual learning. 4, innovation, so co-creating solutions and projects, not only for innovation itself, but also as a very powerful form of applied learning. And then finally, resources, not just funding, information, mentorship opportunities, access, et cetera. And for me, these kind of 5 recurring catalysts really emphasize this need for a human-centric approach. The opportunity to amplify the voices of energy practitioners, leaders, and communities, elevate their experience, and then through peer community, empower the champions needed to achieve our shared climate goals faster together. Thank you for your time today. And with that, I'd like to hand things back over to my colleague, David, and the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. With that, I would like to introduce our esteemed panel today, who are calling in from all over the world. And I truly appreciate the global perspective that we're going to receive here today. We do have a large panel, so I would like to ask each panelist member to limit their responses to, let's say, 3 minutes. And that way we can have the opportunity to cover all of the areas we wish to do so today. So with that said, I'd like to have each of our panelists I'm going to go through a couple of points here. One, if you can tell us where you're joining from. Then I want you to talk a little about the experience that you're bringing into this conversation today. And then I want you to cap it off with let us know why you think a human-centric approach is important and what motivated you to work in this area. Okay? So with that said, I'll go in order of how I announce everyone at the beginning. So I'll start with you, Dr. Bunker, Caitlin.
Great. Good day, everyone. Great to be here. I'm joining from Colorado in the US, and the experience that I'm bringing today is that of an engineer. So I'm an electrical engineer. I studied optimal control strategies for renewable energy microgrids for my PhD. And in my work with the Islands Energy Program at RMI, I've had the opportunity to use that engineering background to build models of island energy systems and analyze various energy transition pathways. And I really enjoy that type of work, running the numbers, getting into the details. And at the same time, I've seen that just having the numbers and having the facts and the models is not enough. When we focus on humans and understand their priorities and learn from their expertise, that's what makes our analysis stronger and ensures that our models provide results that are actually useful. So keeping our partners at the center of our work has been a core component of how our team works in the Caribbean. And from my perspective, a human-centered approach is essential to advancing the clean energy transition.
Thank you. Thank you. Leroy, would you care to share your perspective?
Hi, everyone. Leroy Abraham, bringing you a warm welcome from the British Virgin Islands in the Caribbean. I, like Dr. Caitlin, I'm a trained electrical engineer. I'm the general manager and chief executive officer of the electric utility. The perspective that I'm bringing is all jurisdictions in the Caribbean or around the world have set their own energy transition targets. As the sole electric utility that provides electrical energy to the British Virgin Islands, we're tasked with the objective of ensuring that those targets are met. So we're deep into our energy transition in the British Virgin Islands. So we're well versed with regards to all the obstacles, experiences, opportunities that we've encountered over the past 15 years with regards to transitioning from solely producing electricity based on fossil fuels to finally being able to introduce renewable energy. So we're well experienced with regards to the customer interface, what they are looking for, what we're trying to achieve from both the distributed generation and also utility scale on these small developing island states, SIDS. All of us are different. The topography of these islands also create certain challenges. So I'm bringing, I think, a wealth of experience with regards to, from that Caribbean perspective, how this energy transition looks in this space.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. Ifeoma, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your background and your perspective.
Sure, thank you. So my name is Ife, as everyone has said. I'm not an engineer. I'm actually a lawyer and have done finance. I have a finance background. And I'm currently in Nairobi, attending the AGM for the African Mini Grid Developers Association. We represent them and coordinate the activities in Nigeria. And what we do at Clean Tech Hub is we do research, which is the organization I co-founded and I lead. We do research and data collection. We do policy engagement. We do enterprise development, helping new companies and new startups gain sustainability. We do training and advocacy, and then we support marginalized communities and mainstream them into being active voices in the off-grid renewable energy sector. And so that's the perspective I'll be bringing into the conversations today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Greg?
Howdy, and thank you for the kind invitation to participate. I'm here in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, the city of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in Canada, and I'm on faculty at the University of Saskatchewan School of Environment and Sustainability, political scientist by training. And my own background is two things. As an academic, I wear that hat. The other hat I wear is actually a negotiator power, which is we call it a crown owned, or in other places I might call it a publicly owned utility in the province, in working with Indigenous communities. And we're currently involved in negotiating a large agreement with that electrical utility, which will pave some opportunities for local energy security as part of the energy transition. And that's how I got actually into the field. And so the last decade I've been working in that. Academically, I've been, and professionally, on other sets of negotiations, working with Indigenous communities across the circumpolar north, from Russia to Alaska to Scandinavia, and of course in Canada. And why I think this human-centered approach to energy transitions is so deadly important. It is the enormous opportunity it provides in terms of the value proposition. And we've got to get the conversation beyond price per kilowatt hour, and what kind of opportunities does it leverage, everything from sustainable economic development. You think about in terms of food production, secure water production, water treatment, and long-term employment that is meaningful. And when you scope out that full value chain, there's an enormous opportunity for some communities, not only in the global south, but in the circumpolar north, that are often left out on the margins when large economic and energy transitions occur.
Thank you very much. Austin, you're up next.
Thank you very much. Hello, and half a day from the island of Guam in the Western Pacific Ocean. I'm glad to be joining you here today. I am an assistant professor and the director of the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability here at the University of Guam, and I'm a marine and environmental scientist, and I'm really excited to be talking about this topic today. Some of the experience that I bring as in our role from the Center for Island Sustainability, we help our community to transition to a sustainable future. And in 2019, at the sidelines at the UN General Assembly, we joined this island network called Local 2030 Islands Network, together with our governor and lieutenant governor of Guam, to bring our island aligned with the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we're working on implementing all of those in locally and culturally effective ways. And the human-centric approach that we're taking is that we want to make sure, like the goals of the UN SDGs, not to leave anybody behind, to ensure that the sustainable future is equitable and inclusive. And so we have over 100 working group members from all sectors of society working on all the 17 SDGs, and we have lots of components in there about renewable energy, and we're really excited to have in Guam now a 100% renewable energy mandate by 2045, and we want to make sure that that the renewable energy in future includes everybody, and it's going to be benefiting all of our society, not just the people at the top, but all around. So that's what we're working on, and I'm really excited to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your perspectives and introducing yourselves. And we really do appreciate the wide-ranging perspective that you bring to the table. With that said, we're going to roll into the next session, which is our fireside chat. So if you imagine yourself around a nice quiet fire, Guam. Leroy, I think you're in the Caribbean, so and, and I don't think you need it in Guam, but the idea is that this is going to be an open discussion, relaxed, and we allow the free exchange of ideas and thoughts. With that said, it really is an honor to have you all here, and to our audience, it's a pleasure having you here with us today. And we will spend some time answering some questions that comes in through the chat and here in live from the session. With that, so I'll jump right in. Leroy, if you can share your perspective on how utilities like yours and Carolick work to enhance the workforce development in line with the pace of new innovations in the energy sector. And given the somewhat, I guess, the disruption that comes with that and the disruptive technologies that come about, like battery storage and, of course, solar PV and how it reacts and integrates to the grid, we'd like to hear your perspective on how you prepare your people to deal with this challenge.
So thank you, David. So first of all, you use the word the disruption, but we at the BVI Electricity Corporation, and I think I can safely speak for the remainder of the region in terms of all the utilities. We look at those technologies as more constructive with regards to supporting the traditional means of energy. This energy transition has to take place. All of us are well aware, familiar with regards to the effects of climate change. Climate change has caused or is the cause of these extreme weather events that's being experienced in the Caribbean region with these extreme category 5 hurricanes. So all of us recognize that something has to be done. At the end of the day, all of us call planet Earth home. So all of us are in this together. What we've done specifically at the BVI Electricity Corporation, we've looked at it from a two-pronged approach. And if you can bear with me, I'll use the analogy with regards to eggs. If a country needs eggs, ultimately, and they don't have the resources to produce them, they have to acquire them from outside. So concurrently, what we've done is that we've gotten the eggs from outside, but while at the same time, we've acquired some chickens to make sure that on a consistent basis, we can make eggs. So we've leveraged our relationships with our industry partners to create an environment where the individuals at the utility, we can have that continuous training and development and capacity building for those at the utility. While at the same time, we've broadened our scope with regards to the policymakers, practitioners, and other stakeholders in this realm to ensure that we're all in alignment with regards to this strategic vision for us to achieve our clean energy goals. On that aspect of it, we've supported the local college with regards to a certified training program to develop local expertise in regards to solar PV. So concurrently, while we're building capacity within the organization and the various institutions with our industry partners, we're ensuring concurrently that we have the local expertise to advance our energy transition. And I think this is pretty much the model that's being replicated throughout the region. In all the various jurisdictions. Some of us are a lot more advanced than others, but I can safely say that at the end of the day, it's a model which has been working. We're seeing the tangible benefits in the BVI with regards to energy transition, both on distributed generation and utility scale. So I would say that it's been a success and a model here in BVI, employing that strategy.
Thank you very much. Caitlin, with your work in the Caribbean, I think there's no argument that climate change effects are unequally felt. And those impacted are, typically the poor and marginalized communities across the global South with the least resources to respond. With your broad experience working in the Caribbean, what frameworks or actions can be taken to build energy equity?
Sure. Thanks for the question, David. So we are certainly seeing, as we just heard from Mr. Abraham as well, the Caribbean is leading in terms of a transition to clean and resilient energy systems. The transition is happening, that transition to clean or resilient energy systems. And the Caribbean also has an opportunity to lead in building energy equity. So in our work, we often think about this at a few different scales. At a global level, as you were just mentioning, the importance of equity among nations and regions of the world. And at a more local level, the importance of equity within a given island in terms of not just access to affordable and reliable electricity, that's important, and also participation in decision-making and ownership of the future energy system. So within this ongoing energy transition that's happening today in many islands, there are open questions about how to ensure that the benefits of clean, decentralized energy are equitably captured by everyone. So we've seen how island stakeholders are starting to approach this opportunity to build equity within the energy system through our work at RMI in partnership with Caribbean utilities, governments, and regulators. And we wanted to capture what's being learned, what's being implemented now, while offering a framework for considering energy equity within the energy transition. So earlier this week, the RMI team launched a new report that I'd invite everyone to check out. It's called Ensuring an Equitable Energy Transition, How the Caribbean Can Be a Model for a Resilient and Just Energy Future. And in the report, we outline actionable recommendations in several areas, including to establish equitable structures and processes, to seek and integrate the voices of communities, to effectively collect and utilize a wide array of data, to design targeted programs and policies based on the unique needs of communities, and to develop financial mechanisms that help unlock credit for low-income communities. So again, we see the Caribbean leading today in terms of the energy transition overall, and in terms of including both resilience and equity within the energy sector work that they're doing. So this report that RMI has published earlier this week summarizes what we've learned from our partners so far and offers a framework for considering equity within the energy transition that is applicable within the Caribbean region and also beyond for other countries and regions to utilize.
Thank you so much for that perspective. Ifeoma, or if I may, if we take a little different approach to this and talk a little bit about the work you're doing in ensuring that equity is a key focal point of a just energy transition. How has your gender and energy access program help or empower women to access the energy sector?
Thank you for that question, Ben. I think, one of the things that underlines our philosophy at Cleantech Hub is you cannot build a sustainable energy system and ignore half of the population as part of that process, whether it's as consumers or as decision makers. And building from that philosophy, the question for us is then how do we make sure that women are informed consumers? How do we make sure that they're part of decision making? How do we make sure that they're part of the process of even building companies and enterprises that are going to be driving, green energy? And what we've done at Cleantech Hub is, first of all, even though there's a lot more women working in the renewable energy sector across sub-Saharan Africa, not just Nigeria, a lot of the decision making is firmly held in the hands of men. So one of the things that we've done is to begin to encourage putting policy points that encourages investors and the government to make sure that when there's donor financing or donor investments that are coming into the sector, that they go to companies who actually have a percentage of women or underrepresented communities. And we're seeing that increasingly because when investors come into Nigeria or even some of the West African countries that we work in, one of the things that they do is to look for companies that have a good female representation. But even more particularly in Cleantech Hub, we empower women through our consumer lens. So when we're talking about climate change, and which is the topic around climate justice, which is the topic around COP, one of the things that we've seen is that women are the largest consumers of energy in the house. And so even from a clean cooking perspective, when we've tried to do clean cooking, clean cook stoves in rural communities, our approach is to make sure that, we're talking to them from a health and safety and justice perspective, not just the fact that we have people who want to sell cook stoves to them. And this is really what catches their attention, because it helps also to transition them quickly from using firewoods for cooking to using more sustainable methods of cooking, and creates a holistic, safer environment for them at the same time. The other thing that we do very well is building capacity for women who own MSMEs. So we work with the bakery and confectionery community in Nigeria, and helping them to transition from using firewood for their baking, to using other cleaner resources for their bakeries. And we've seen some of these businesses grow from having one bakery to 3 or 4 bakeries. So we have a state that cuts down 664 trees every day, just because bakeries need them to bake bread. And so when you multiply them across 36 states in Nigeria, you get the sense of the magnitude of the problem that we're facing. So it's also helping these MSMEs look at cleaner ways to sort of grow their businesses using clean technology. And then, we also want to see more women in C-level positions, both in government and in private sector, women who are running businesses in the clean energy sector and who are part of the decision-making. I can confidently say that, Nigeria is leading in this, because we have a lot of strong women entrepreneurs who are running mini-grid companies and solar home system companies, and even at the policy and women who are actually in charge of ministries and departments in the off-grid sector. And then very lastly, we also we do a lot of work around training women that are not engineers to come into the sector, whether it's from an operations and HR and accounting, and so make the sector attractive to more women professionals to come in. The perception around the energy sector generally, not just renewable energies, that it's very male dominated and it's not friendly to women. Well, one of the things we're working on with companies is to make sure that there are gender-friendly policies that can encourage more women, even beyond the engineers, look at this as a viable sector. So these are some of the things that we've been working on at Clean Tech Hub, along with several other partners. It's not just us, and making sure that those policies and those practices are enshrined in corporate governance, but also at national and subnational level policies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love the diversity and the perspectives and the experience of the programs, and we look forward to more. We're continuing. Greg, if we may ask for your perspective on this, the community appropriate sustainable energy security cases initiative is working with Northern and Indigenous communities to reimagine energy security. How does this work foster community understanding and empowerment of the energy transition across the social, cultural, and linguistic divides?
You betcha. No, thank you so kindly. What we've done is, this came up, I think, when David's opening remarks, in this emphasis on peer-to-peer, and we've done that in cross nation regions. So from Alaska to northern Sweden to northern Norway, and then parts of northern Canada. But when we built the project, we built it ground up with communities at the table to identify what are those core issues that need to be identified. But we also have created, often you hear about sister cities, and it's usually big, cities, Toronto to Chicago or whatever, sister cities. What we've done is made the communities peer-to-peer. And this is a point that Leroy identified in terms of leaders, some are ahead and some are following, and how you can pull those together. And learning from peer-to-peer is deadly important in what we're doing. Not only, sharing those experiences, sharing the training, and also we're engaged with our partners actually in a training program. And this capacity building, I know Caitlin talked about that, as well as Leroy, is critically important, a part of it. So we have a Masters of Energy Security program to break down those barriers. And like Aoife said, on things like women, and this is critical to understand, the most important decision maker in the household typically are women, and having women included in it, both in the education, training, and decision making around these energy transition is critically important. So that's what we're stitching together. So we very concretely bringing communities together. And I really liked what Leroy said about stakeholders. This multi-stakeholder approach is critical because you got to have policymakers, communities, engineering companies, utilities, and it's got to be everybody in the boat rowing together with a common vision. And that lowers transaction costs for communities that Caitlin identified and Aoife identified. So you don't leave half the population, whether it's women or poor communities, out of the discussion.
Very interesting perspective, and I see some common themes throughout. And it's all sort of, although we're different geographies, there are some common things that are happening, and it sort of all blends together to work to positive results. Austin, we'd like to hear your perspective on, or some. Tell us a little bit about the program that you have with the University of Guam and the development of the Center for Islands Sustainability, and how that's resulted in the number of students that are receiving an opportunity to demonstrate climate leadership locally and internationally. Can you share a bit about your approach to the skills development and the framework that the center uses, and how you work with local 2030 Islands Network and leverage the experiences to enhance an exchange of best ideas? So Austin,
Sure,
a mouthful, but please.
Yeah, thank you very much for those questions. I think for starting with the students, we have a couple of programs that we're working on with students to develop their skills in climate leadership and renewable energy leadership. At the University of Guam, we have what's called the UOG Green Army, which is a student organization, and they engage the broader student community through high school leaders through the Guam Green Growth Youth Ambassadors Program. So our center is helping to cultivate those young leaders, to train them in sustainable development goals, renewable energy, climate change topics. And so they're doing a remarkable job being leaders to continue to push our island towards actually meeting our mandate, which I mentioned early, which is 100% renewable energy by 2045. So we're really proud to be one of the, well, actually, for the United States, at least, the only U.S. island territory that has this ambitious mandate, and we're continuing to move forward with that. The other network that we're part of in the Global Islands Network is called the Local 2030 Islands Network, and we're really excited that this new organization, which is actually the world's first global island-led network devoted to advancing the SDGs through locally driven and culturally informed solutions, has just stood up a brand new community of practice, and that's called the Resilience and Energy Systems Community of Practice, and it's going to provide targeted technical assistance in partnership with the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory to support island economies in advancing in achieving clean energy futures. And so for us in Guam, is we're trying to get ready to get to 100% renewable energy. It's really important for us to partner with Local 2030, and also I'm really happy to be connected with RMI because we need that technical capacity here as we create this new updated strategy for our energy future, which is actually going to be our roadmap to 100% renewable energy. And one final point that I wanted to make was that we're not just doing capacity building with students, but we're trying to develop the workforce in general. And the picture here in my virtual background is our new program called the Guam Green Growth Conservation Corps. And so we're using this program to prepare our community for the emerging green economy. And just a few weeks ago, they installed nearly 500 solar panels on top of a public school. So that's really important training as we ramp up renewable energy production here in Guam. We want to make sure that our local workforce will be part of that, and they will be helping to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Leroy, we're going to ask you to share your perspective on subject matter that I am a little experienced with, unfortunately, but we know the impact of climate change. Climate change is it has a severe impact on the Caribbean region, and a part of the Utilities program in terms of personnel assistance to islands that are impacted by hurricanes. We know that there's a strong emphasis on building back better in terms of the infrastructure, but what can utilities do to ensure personnel are equipped to recover from a crisis? Is there space for us to leverage some of the opportunities around peer-to-peer networking? And can we develop a structure to support this in climate leadership? That's for you, Leroy. There you go.
No, I just, sorry about that, David. I just had to unmute. So as you rightfully indicated, both of us have some very good experience in this area, having been both of our respective islands being affected by the most powerful Atlantic formed hurricane in September 2017, Hurricane Irma, which devastated both Anguilla and the British Virgin Islands. From the recovery of that, we needed quite a bit of resources and support, some of which was provided through CARELEC's very mature CARELEC Disaster Assistance Program, the CDAP program. So CARELEC has a very long and established system with regards to providing that level of support after an event with regards to recovery. To leverage on that very mature program that's in place and recognizing now in the advent of this global pandemic, which has changed things drastically with regards to the movement of people from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So also taking that into account and recognizing that all of us are in various phases with regards to our energy transition. We're building back better. We're ensuring that we have as much resilience in our electricity infrastructure that didn't exist prior to those extreme weather events that we suffered. So incorporating, and as I mentioned before, we're not looking at clean energy technologies as being disruptive to this industry. We're looking at clean energy technologies as being constructive and supporting the traditional means of energy production. And as we slowly transition away from the traditional means of energy production and moving more into renewables, I think that is going to change the whole landscape with regards to disaster recovery, David, as you could imagine. So no longer would it be a myriad, because the electricity infrastructure will still remain. There will still be poles and equipment and such as that. We're looking at a new skill set of resources that need to come in, essentially to restore all of the clean energy technologies that existed in addition to the traditional technologies. So from that, so putting things in perspective, I think is a natural progression that will occur. So as opposed to similarly in 2017, when we were looking at the resources of just linesmen coming in to reinstate lines, we'll now be looking at renewable energy professionals, whether in solar, wind, and all of those various disciplines to restore the entire energy infrastructure, which would be quite a diversified new energy system, incorporating both traditional systems and renewable energy.
Thank you for that perspective. If I may ask, understanding your organization is driven by research and data for sustainable development. What is the impact that you've seen of these factors on disadvantaged communities that you've worked with?
That question is for me?
No, I'm sorry, that's for Eve.
Yeah, that's a big question. So we do a lot of quantitative and qualitative research. Some of it is commercially driven. So we have companies who want to come in to do business in Nigeria and then ask us to do market research. But the more important type of research that we do are the ones that actually get a sense of user attitudes, and community demands. And this sort of research are the ones that aid the development and distribution of clean technology so that those technologies are suited for local needs and are the type of technologies that the local community are able to use. The other type of research we do, I mean, one of the ones that I think it's very important and that has helped escalate and accelerate and grow the mini-grid sector is one that we did with the Rocky Mountain Institute on building out business models for undergrid mini-grid. And we came up with about 5 business models, which has then helped developers scale up their businesses in terms of how they approach rural communities and also designing what might work for each community. And that research report has been downloaded several times. It was funded by Olon, who's an impact investor in Nigeria, and helping these developers actually figure out, because one of the things about Nigeria people sometimes don't understand is how large and how diverse it is. We have 36 states, almost 250 ethnic groups and ethnic communities. So going from one to the other, you're just dealing with very different scenes and very different environments. And so what those business models have done is to give the developers a variety of choices in terms of how they design their mini-grid work from community to community, and help them scale their businesses to reach some of the most remotest parts of Nigeria. The other research that I think is very exciting and that is starting to grow in Nigeria is the one around agriculture and productive use. There's a lot of data out there around how to grow agriculture. Food is really, we have a growing food crisis in Nigeria, and a lot of it is also around how we store food. We have a storage problem. And so you find that even when farmers have good yields, they lose money, and there's a scarcity in the market and people aren't able to pay for food or buy food. And so one of the things that we're beginning to see, and this is all backed by data and research, some of which we're involved in, is how do we get rural cooperative, rural farmers, and even large-scale farmers to begin to think about how to employ and deploy clean technologies to actually upskill a lot of their farming activities, both from farm, both from storage, and then all the way to markets where they can store them in cold rooms. And this is also being translated to the health sector, where during COVID, we could see a lot of the work that had come into play from the research and data that had been collected in terms of how we're deploying solar solutions in isolation centers and for cold rooms for vaccines. So these are the sort of things that the data is helping to do to help people understand where the needs are, the greatest needs are, and how to deploy them to serve communities that need them in a most efficient way and in a most sustainable way.
Thank you so much for that perspective. I'd like to thank all the panelists for the great and candid sharing of information and thoughts that you've had to my various questions. I think we covered a very wide scope of topics in all of those Q&As. I think if we could maybe I'll ask each of you to sort of do a rapid round of what would be your call to action, all right? And let's say 30 seconds. Let's go in order, and I'll start with you, Greg.
Yeah, first and foremost is capacity building. That would be by, if in 30 seconds, call to action, and making accessible energy champion education. So energy projects can be community led at where communities are at.
Thank you. Next, let's go, Austin. What would be your call to action?
I think Greg took mine. I had the same thought. I guess we're both from universities, but capacity building is huge. We need to be sharing information so that it's easier for all of our communities around the world to get to the clean energy future, and for islands and communities like us committed to 100% renewable energy, we want to see the rest of the world commit to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin.
A similar theme for me, I think my call to action would be every day try to learn something from someone who has a different background from you. I can't emphasize enough the value to me as an engineer to not just run the numbers, but to also connect with humans and understand their perspectives. So I think this type of connection helps us build deeper understanding and uncover the best possible solutions and do that faster.
Remain in human focus, human-centric, right?
Yes.
Leroy, what would be your call to action?
Sorry about that. I'm going to take a different perspective, David, and I'm going to say climate finance. From the utility standpoint, after alignment of all stakeholders, developing your strategic roadmap, the biggest impediment at that point in stage after you've developed that capacity in order to achieve those strategic clean energy goals is finance. So I would say the call of action for me would be climate finance.
Yeah, you have to finance the capacity trend building and efforts that are going on too. It does take resources to build more resources.
That's right.
Appreciate that. If you can close us out with your call to action, and then we'll from this we'll transition straight into the Q&A session if we have any questions.
Sure. Mine will be invest in local clean energy startups. I think that's important because they create jobs, but they also drive down the cost of projects. Because what you then have is that you're empowering local communities and local innovators, but at the same time, you have foreign investors who can use them as OEM to drive projects into rural communities. So get us 1,000 new startups every year in sub-Saharan Africa in the clean tech space.
Thank you so much. If we have any questions in the chat, we can take those now. I'll hand it over to my colleague Jason, if you don't mind taking us over to the Q&A session.
Yes, thank you, folks. Online, if you do have any questions for the panelists, please add them to chat. And David, feel free to solicit any from folks in person in the pavilion. Maybe while we wait for any targeted questions, just one high-level question for folks. I think there's a lot of interest in terms of this human-centric approach. How do we balance the urgency of the energy transition with what some might perceive as very deep, perhaps lengthy work that's required with a human-centric approach? I'm curious if anyone has any reflections on this, how to balance this perceived tension. Greg, please.
Yeah. If it's a perceived tension, we should dispel the myth as quickly as possible, because I think the human-centered approach is really the value proposition among all the different things, whether it's mitigating climate change events, whether it's hurricanes in the Caribbean or it's forest fires in the north that take out transmission lines and so on. And the opportunity, the huge opportunity for greater socioeconomic justice by creating wealth growth opportunity. So you can just, when you focus on people's wallets and purses and the dollars and cents, it let the money talk for itself. And that, I don't see this as a tension. Actually moving us to a human-centered approach will accelerate this transition.
And to add to what Greg just stated, at the end of the day, we can't automate this. It has to be focused on humans. Humans have to be the ones to progress this at the end of the day. So there's no way that we can remove the human element from these transitions. It has to begin there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Austin, Caitlin, Ify, any other thoughts here?
I would just agree. I don't see it necessarily as a tension or a trade-off. It's not an or, but an and. So, taking a human-centric approach, from my perspective, is the only way to achieve the energy transition at the pace and the scale that's required. So it's going to take all of us to develop and implement the best solutions, and we need humans, energy leaders who are supported and listened to and part of the conversation to make this happen.
Yeah, I agree with those points as well from Greg, Leroy, and Caitlin. Um, there's a lot in this for our communities. There's the economic perspective. Uh, our president emeritus here at the University of Guam, Dr. Underwood, always used to tell people that our biggest export here in Guam is money, is a dollar. As soon as we get a dollar in, then we have to ship it out to bring more fossil fuels in to power our vehicles and our power plants. So if we can transition to a clean energy future faster, then we have more local dollars staying here for local needs. So we're excited for more of those opportunities, and of course the value. Everybody cares about having a clean island, and they don't like to see more reasons for pollution and or reasons for economic loss. So those two things, I think, speak a lot to our community, to our human-centric approach here.
I also agree with everyone's point. I think, you know, the process of change is as important as the change itself. I also think that it's important for communities to actually see how that change occurs. And so when we're talking about building a human-centric approach, putting people first as part of that approach, I think is important. And having them be the ones who are helping to figure out and drive things is also important. I can't remember who said this, but this is not, I think it was Caitlin that says this is not something you can automate. But it's, you know, you have to be very, very clear that as you're building that process, the community is with you lockstep. Because when we've seen processes rushed when it comes to community-led community projects, they don't last. I mean, you know, in a few years, it's back to square one. So I think this is why it's very important to actually respect the process and see it through, because then we see better sustainability in the long term.
Thank you very much, panelists. David, unless there's an in-person question, one more that's just come in here via chat. And I believe this is for all panelists. What is a recent development that is giving you optimism in your work right now?
So if I can start on that one, Jason. In the British Virgin Islands, the BVIEC, the electric utility, we supply 12 different islands. We have one island which is not connected to the parent grid, which we operate a very small power station to supply a small population on that island. We recently signed a contract to install a 2.1 megawatt renewable energy hybrid system on that island, which will be able to displace approximately 95% of the fuel that's currently being used to produce electricity. So we're very proud that that's our first utility scale project that will be implemented in the British Virgin Islands. So we're very pleased about that. The students from our recent college program, solar technician program, will be integral with regards to building that facility. So as I say, we're going to see the whole journey from A to Z involved in this program, making sure, based on the context of what we're discussing about, it's human-centric at the end of the day.
Thank you for that, Leroy. Congratulations. I think we have time maybe just to hear from one or two other folks on this question. What's a recent development that's giving you optimism in your work?
Great, here. I'll throw on one real quickly. COVID-19 has been terrible as a pandemic, and it's kind of almost created walls rather than open doors many times just because of mobility and so on. But one of the things that's in communities high in the Arctic, we've been working with communities and doing this collection of creating community energy profiles, qualitative and quantitative data that Eve is talking about. But it was with community researchers and youth who embraced it at the community level. And we could do this literally thousands of kilometers away and overcome those kind of things that should otherwise be a barrier. And if we can overcome those kind of things and move forward in energy transition during a COVID pandemic, there's not much we can do that we cannot do. And I like in Saskatchewan, if people don't know, it's largely a prairie province, people know. And we like to say in Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan people can move mountains, and that's why we don't have any.
Thank you for that. Caitlin.
That's great. I might just offer one other. So because our team gets to work with Leroy's team at BVIC, certainly their successes bring me optimism. But I wanted to highlight another island as well, which is Montserrat. They're adding a second phase of solar PV and battery storage. That gets them to about 50% renewables by installed capacity. One of our colleagues on our team is Montserratian and has shown incredible leadership to make this project happen. So it's been really inspiring to see the success of that project because of the direct local impact it will have for people in Montserrat and the example being set for the rest of the Caribbean region and beyond.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, panelists, for your time and your comments. Really quickly, I'd love to share a little bit about our next steps for the ETA, and then as well as hear from Oliver Weisbein on the Africa Mini-Grids program, a really exciting program he'll preview that's coming next year. So just at a really high level, for us, 2022 is an exciting year. We're really seeking to launch the ETA, which we've shared a little bit about today. Really three things I wanted to highlight here. The first one is a fellowship program. Q1, we're going to have a pilot cohort focused on supporting Caribbean project partners, and then later in the year, scaling that to a global cohort launch, Q2 or Q3. So really excited for the fellowship program launch. The second thing that we're in the midst of design right now, and would love, if anyone's interested, please reach out, working on our leadership accelerator. So a cohort training and facilitation program, which takes place over the course of several months. Developing solutions to shared and individual problems. For example, a cohort of regulators in the Caribbean, Africa, and the Pacific focused on regulatory approaches with respect to emerging resilience needs, just as an example of what that might look like. The last one is the African School of Regulation. So a really exciting partnership effort that's still in formation, initially a virtual platform developed to disseminate sound energy regulation and policy in Africa in partnership with the Florence School of Regulation, the NL Foundation, Sustainable Energy for All, and University of Cape Town. Before we close, we'd like to take a closer look at one of these launch offerings next year, the Africa Mini-Grids program, which I think really resonates with this human-centric approach, amplifying technical assistance through peer community. The Africa Mini-Grids program is a GEF-funded program. It will be implemented by the UNDP with RMI, which aims to increase access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa by improving the financial viability and promoting scaled up commercial investments in renewable energy mini-grids. It's my pleasure to invite Oliver Weisbein to take the floor and give us a few high-level preview comments on the Africa Mini-Grids program. Oliver.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. By way of quick introduction again, I'm Oliver. I'm UNDP's global lead on energy programming. We're very pleased to be part of this event. It's an important topic. Human development and leaving no one behind are at the very center of UNDP's mission. And we couldn't be more supportive of this sort of approach. As Jason said, I'm going to be saying a few words previewing the new Africa Mini-Grids program. It's a big new initiative. It's contributing to UNDP's enhanced ambition to support electrification. We recently announced that we will be seeking to electrify with our partners 500 million people by 2025. A big objective, but we're really looking forward to making progress on that. Mini-grids are obviously a very promising technology. And as you'll see in these slides, while we'll present the overall program, capacity building and human capacity is very much going to be the way to achieve these overall objectives. As Jason was saying, the program has a theory of change around scaling up investment for mini-grids, and in particular around cost reduction, either through financing costs, hardware costs, soft costs, and innovative business models. We believe if we can address cost reduction, mini-grids will become more competitive vis-a-vis alternative technologies, and the overall aim of the project is for commercial capital to flow to this sector at scale. As currently formulated with the initial funding, there is around 45 please. This is a partnership. Here you have some headline partners, but I think partnership is really going to run through this program from all levels. So not just these sort of logos and big names here. Jeff is a big donor, providing some initial funding here. We're happy to be leading this at UNDP. RMI is a key partner in the design and in the regional project and some of the national projects. AFDB will be also running with some national projects and bringing a finance element to this. And the key partner are our implementing partners at the national level. Each of these 18 projects is led by the Rural Electrification Agency or the Ministry of Energy. Again, part of this important bottom-up ethos. We have 18 participating countries. They've actually joined in 2 rounds. An initial 11 were approved in December 2019, and the second round in June 2021. We like the mix of countries here. There are both large and small countries, more advanced countries such as Ethiopia and Nigeria when it comes to mini-grids, small island developing states, Francophone, Anglophone. And in terms of knowledge sharing and South-South learning, we think that creates an interesting mix and an interesting platform to have all these countries moving ahead. They represent 300 million unelectrified people, which is also a substantial share of unelectrified people in Africa today. Next slide, please. There is quite a lot of support in the area of mini-grids at this point in time. This program will seek to have 3 key areas of focus. One will be around bringing consensus on mini-grid delivery models in each market. Our government seeking to support private sector-owned models, community-owned models. Where will tariffs be set? We think it's important to have inclusive dialogues around that to get ownership and certainty going forward on those models. Productive use is another area that this project will be, or this program will be emphasizing. And most of the national projects will have productive use elements incorporated. Key ultimately, we believe, as many others do, to the financial viability of mini-grids to get that demand and into a virtuous cycle where productive use can result in lower tariffs, increased demand. The third area is data and digitalization. We're really emphasizing this within the design and see a lot of opportunities, both in terms of governments administering mini-grids via new digital platforms, as well as the ability to extract, disseminate, and learn from data that is digitally collected. And I think very interesting opportunities also in terms of capacity building, bringing in digital and data. Next slide, please. A key part of each of the national projects will be putting forward certain mini-grid pilots that will be financially supported by the projects. This slide sets out some categorizations around that. Essentially, we see 3 types of mini-grid pilots. Greenfield mini-grids, where an entirely new solar battery mini-grid system will be supported by the national project. Hybridization of existing diesel mini-grids, and what we're calling a productive use overlay onto an existing mini-grid that pre-existed the national project coming along, but the national project will now support innovative business models around those productive uses. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides go a little more into the delivery framework. At the very heart of this project is national ownership and human-centered development. So each of the 18 national projects will have 4 components. Each of these components actually targets a specific stakeholder group, policies and regulations working with typically civil servants around those issues. Business model innovation working with developers and the private sector, scaled up financing working with the financial sector and individuals who are present there. And then a cross-cutting digital element. Next slide, please. And then each of those 18 national projects will be supported by a regional chapeau, which specifically will focus on knowledge and coordination. It will produce content under component 1, drawing on good practice and preparing reports and toolkits that can be easily deployed by the national projects. Component 2 will have rapidly deployable technical assistance that can problem solve when a national project hits a snag. Component 3 is around communities of practice, component 4 on digital, and component 5 on M&E. Next slide, please. And this slide sort of captures at the regional level some of the interplay between the first component that will produce these knowledge tools, and then the third component, which will have these communities of practice, most likely organized around specific groups, public servants, the private sector, finance, supply chain, communities, and look to empower and create an environment where knowledge and experiences can easily be shared as part of this human-centric development. And RMI through the ETA are specifically going to be leading that component. I think that's about it. Next slide, but I think it's the final one. Well, just to wrap up, I hope that's a helpful overview, and we're very much looking forward to working with RMI and maybe others on this panel as we proceed on this. Thanks a lot, Jason.
Oliver, thank you so much for that overview and your time today. I'd like to hand it back over to David for our close.
All right, thank you, Jason. Thank you to the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs for hosting this event. And to our panelists, thank you so much for the broad range and perspective and all of the experience that you brought to the discussion today. Thank you most of all for sharing your time, insight, and expertise with us all. Humans are the center of the energy transition, and it's important that we need to ensure that energy leaders have a robust set of tools to achieve our pressing global and local climate priorities. This is important because we also need to make sure that it's a just and equitable, sustainable transition that can take root in our respective regions. This is something that, in order, I think it was the theme across all of the panelists, which is we need to partner and we need to build local resources and talent so that this can be a very sustainable approach and we can achieve our very ambitious objectives. And at the end of the day, those objectives are, in many cases, for the regions that we work and live for our own survival. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. And we wish everyone an excellent remainder of the day. Thank you.